This hasn't done much for my imposter syndrome, being sat there with such incredible academics. I'll try not to look too much like I've won a competition to be here. Piers, thank you for that introduction. I have spent the last 15 days in a row presenting from Wimbledon for the BBC, on the BBC News channel in the UK, BBC World, BBC on Breakfast, the news at 10. That is my very long-winded excuse as to why I don't have a speech in front of me. I find myself back in an academic setting already making excuses as to why I haven't done my homework. So I apologize for that. But when Warwick asked me to come along today, I knew I had to say yes, because without coming here, and something that happened in this very building, I think you did say 2005, didn't you, Piers? Like all television presenters and broadcasters, I like to play fast and loose with my real age. So I'm very happy for people to think that I'm younger than I really am. But since 2005 is now out there, clearly I seem to have graduated here nearly 20 years ago. There was something that happened in this building that led me to the job that I do today. One time where I finally said the word yes, and I want to share that story briefly with you. Why I was the sort of person that said no all the time, there are many reasons. I suspect that's probably best left for a therapy session. I failed my 11 plus exam. We lived in a grammar school area. My friends went off to the grammar school. I went off to the state comprehensive. We, for part of my childhood, lived in a village in Oxfordshire. And think back, this was the late 80s, early 90s. We were the only Asians in the village. And we had the post office and corner shop, and we lived above it. So we ticked all those stereotype boxes. That was okay. There were some people that were very welcoming and were very happy to have us there. And there were some people that were not so welcoming and not so happy to have us there. And when you go through those things, you get used to holding yourself back, to hanging back in the shadows, to not putting yourself forward, to not really wanting to be seen. That was ingrained in me even when I came to Warwick, when I started English and theatre way back when. The first couple of years that I was here, I focused in on the work, a little bit of student life outside of it, and not much else. In my final year, that inevitable question came, and I'm sure some of you are experiencing this at the moment, or have already experienced it. What are you going to do next? And my wonderful supportive Indian parents, who may well have liked their only son to have done medicine or accountancy or pharmacy, got lumbered with me doing English and theatre. But they loved and supported me. But quite naturally in the final year, they were asking me, what will I do next? I knew that I had a love of telling stories, and I'm sure I'm in a room today full of people that enjoy telling stories, whether that's in print, whether that's on film, whether that's on stage. In my final year, I was aware that we had two fantastic things here at Warwick, Bore and Raw, the radio offering, and the student newspaper. Problem that I had was a lot of my friends, people that were on my course, were already working there. And I thought, you know what, if I turn up in my third year, what are they going to think of me? I'm going to be judged again. Again, I held myself back. I found information one day about something called Warwick TV, which was starting up. And I thought, you know what, there's no one that I know that's working on Warwick TV. So at least I can go there with a bit of a cloak of anonymity and see what happens there. It was a little studio in this building, in the Warwick Arts Centre, and I went along there, and they were holding screen tests for people that wanted to present. And the guy that was running it said, right, who wants to go next? And somebody would put their hand up and they'd go next. And as usual, I held myself back and didn't put myself forward. About the sixth, seventh time of asking, I said, yes, I'll have a go. And I sat down and I did that screen test and presented this program. And something happened in that moment which made me think, this feels right. This feels like the sort of thing that I should be doing a little bit more. There is a slight caveat to why that felt right, and this is probably more of an admission of my quite sad childhood, I think, in that many of you in the room hopefully will remember CFAX and teletext. Some of you will not. It was like the internet on the telly before the internet. If you wanted your news, your information, Sport, page 302, people might remember that on the BBC. We're going old school, a bit like the red button now with digital text. Anyway, this is one thing that I used to do as a child. I didn't think I'd be standing in front of hundreds of people admitting this. But I used to pretend I was presenting my own program, sports program, and I would read off teletext. And it was a make-believe program that I would present. I did have some friends, I promise you, I did have some friends. It wasn't that depressing, but I've told you, there were other challenges going on. So this was the world that I lost myself into. I guess that day I was quite well placed to read off an auto cue as they asked me to do that day. And the guy that ran that day, Chris, who's a good friend of mine now, said, why don't we create a sports program and put this thing out there every week? And so this sports show on Warwick TV was born out of finally taking that one moment in my life to go, yes, I'll flex outside of my comfort zone. I won't worry so much about what other people are going to think. I'll put myself out there to be judged and see what happens. And that yes led to me doing a year's work on Warwick TV, creating a portfolio of work, a show reel that allowed me then to get into a postgraduate diploma in broadcast journalism. I walked into a BBC local radio newsroom, 3 Counties Radio, in 2006, and I stayed at the BBC ever since. And so if there's one nudge that I would give, and it won't be for everybody in this room, but if you're, like I was, sat here where you are today, 20 years ago, unsure about what comes next, slightly fearful, scared at times, be brave and say that word, yes. Not every time that I've said yes since has it led to wonderful, amazing things. Flash forward 15 years later, I was in a BBC newsroom working on an overnight shift when the presenter who comes into the BBC One News at 10 on a Sunday night, the sports news on that, called in sick. And the editor, and bear in mind I've been freelancing for about a month, that was it, asked me if I would sit in and present that bulletin. My default setting was to say no, but I said, yes, let's do it. I remember walking onto set, sitting down. Normally, we would write our own scripts and read them off the auto cue. If I'm doing something like Wimbledon, that will, a bit like this, come off the top of my head or through notes. But a bulletin I can read off the teleprompter. The teleprompter that we read from is worked by a pedal. So I have a foot pedal that I will push down on. I'd have been a broadcaster for 15 years at that stage. I remember with my director in my ear, because I have an earpiece in, when the countdown started, 10, 9, as they hand over from London to Salford, I could feel this thumping noise get louder and louder. I was thinking, what is that? I realized it was my heart that was thumping so loudly. The issue that I used to have is when I got tense and nervous, my knees started to shake. And so I've got to pedal this auto cue. As it went 3, 2, 1, I'm pushing down on the pedal, and my script is just jumping up and down as I'm live on air. And I could just about make out what the words are, and I got through it. That wasn't the most mortifying bit. The issue that I have is that monitor that I read from can be seen in the gallery by the editors, the producers, and all of my team. So all I heard in my ear for those 4 minutes that I was reading was people laughing throughout the whole thing. And I thought, you know what, there has to be a better way of dealing with this. But I was still glad that I said yes, because it led to doing more of those shifts, BBC One Breakfast, everything else, and that full-time job that followed. So sometimes fighting through that fear will serve you well. Do not be fooled. 20 years is a long time, and not everything has gone up like this. My career has been much more like this. There have definitely been lows in there, times where I have lost my job, I've had to rent out my flat, I've had to move back home with mum and dad. Great highs as well, covering Olympics and Grand Slams and Formula One Grand Prix and Champions League finals and all of those things. But it can go a little bit like this. We are here as arts students. There isn't necessarily one set job that what you're doing will lead you to. That's okay. I better be quiet now, because normally I would have a director in my ear saying, shut up, wrap it up. There's at least half the people that still need to get their degrees. So I will stop here in full flow. But the most important reason that I'm stood here is to congratulate you and to say, well done for what you have achieved. I know when I was here, there were times where I wasn't sure if I would get to the finish line. It is a huge achievement, what you've done today, to get to this place and to get your degree. And my graduation day is a bit of a blur because I didn't really take it all in. I was a bit worried about what it was supposed to lead to and what do I do next and what's everyone else going to say. I really, really hope that you celebrate and enjoy this day. And as a final point, if there is anyone here who's thought about broadcasting or journalism or whatever it might be, whether it's today, tomorrow, next month, next week, next year, 10 years from now, please know that you can always reach out if you've got any questions, anything like that. It's part of being a Warwick alumni, and I'm always happy to help. I better stop talking. Thank you so much, and congratulations, everyone.